All right, we are back on the Gravity Podcast with Chet Scott. Chet, you're becoming now like a reoccurring guest.
I'm a regular.
Which must mean that people don't mind listening to you.
Or that you don't care and you just want to keep having me on because you enjoy it.
Yeah, actually, that's probably more true.
Right.
Because I actually don't know who is listening to what, but I don't care because I do love being with you.
Right.
We've talked about that. And we were just kind of talking about what we were going to talk about. And so you said, because I asked you to sort of be prepared, which is a big ask.
Mm-hmm.
But I asked you, you said that you wanted to talk about the roots of endurance.
Mm-hmm.
So let's do that.
Okay.
Why don't we just start off by you kind of explaining what you mean by that?
Yeah. I just think it's a good topic. You know, if we talk about built to lead and you and why we practice, why we do what we're doing, and why we do what we do at Built to Lead the way we do it, it is because, like, it's not a quick fix. Why isn't it a quick fix? Because all of the really sticky disciplines that lead you to enduring well are things that you have to just do over and over and over again and not lose heart, not lose hope, not get very proud of the fact of what you can do. I mean, all of that so that we can endure all the trials that are bound to come that we can't anticipate. And so it just has struck me with how many companies, how many couples, how many individuals like are really good at starting. And we chase a lot of things really with like our whole heart early on, but we're not really good at enduring adversity, at enduring like getting our ass kicked, getting a disease that just makes no sense, or losing a loved one that was too young. And so the world starts strong. I see so many examples of it. And I work with a lot of young athletes. And I see many of them having started really young. And by the time they're now collegiate Division I athlete, they have lost the ability to endure. And they're only like 22.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, come on, man, like this is the gig. Like if you're tired now, wait till you're my age, right? Life is an endurance test. And so as I've studied what causes, healthy individuals, teams, and leaders to sustain high performance over time, there's like root truths to how you endure and endure well.
Okay.
So that's kind of why and I've just been thinking about it all the time. So, and I thought about you. So this is why I was going to say I'm making it about you. So I thought the best way to start, because you're getting ready to grab the reins and go where you go, but I think I'm going to grab them.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. So what I really was thinking is like, I look at you and I look at your life. And people that don't know you could say, well, he's just had it made. I hear that all the time about my clients. Well, Chet, what do your clients need to endure, man? They have reached the pinnacle. They're all powerful, wealthy, look healthy, and they have you working with them. Like they're just filled with luxuries. And I'm always like, you don't know their story. They've endured. And now you just see somebody who looks like they're now built to lead. You need to know their story to know what did they endure and how did they endure it and why did they keep getting up? Because they will be able to tell you that. Right. And so I thought we'd start with like, I have heard an awful lot of your story. And I don't know how many of your listeners have really heard it. Like going back
to
the roots of your endurance. Okay. Because I see you thriving today, and I've been watching you thrive more as you've done the work and you've experimented and you've played and you've had fun with it, but it's been an endurance test.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you are making the most of it, but it's not easy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was just, hey, athlete, why don't you start off by just telling them a little bit about your endurance?
Well, I have done that actually on the show and other forums, and actually the place that I really kind of told my story. You were there when
I know.
did the Chamber of Commerce event, and that is also a episode that we posted. I'll put it in the notes what number, so you can actually hear like the full story on that episode. But and I have lots of questions about this, so I'll probably take the reins back.
But I still want to hear more. I've heard all that.
Yeah.
But there's a lot more that you have not shared.
Yeah.
That is buried in there that I was hoping you would feel comfortable, just like, all right, yeah, I know all that stuff, but I'd like the audience to know more. There's a lot more to your endurance story.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure if there's something specific that you're referencing, but I can just say that, like, yeah, when you do like a 10-minute talk about your life, there's obviously a lot that you're not going to say, because I think, when I hear the kind of roots of endurance and, what you're talking about as far as enduring life, enduring hard things, enduring anything, everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
That there is a lot that goes into that. And, in my case, I have had to do a lot of work. Mm-hmm. Now, I actually, for one reason or another, sort of like doing hard work. Mm-hmm. Not always. I mean, when you're in it, it's like, not necessarily enjoyable or pleasurable. It's actually hard. Sometimes it's, torturous, but there's something about continuing to do the work that I have some pleasure in. And I think, it's sort of just like the way that I like to learn.
Right.
And I think we think about learning, from a educational standpoint, textbook standpoint, but, and we've talked about this too, reading. And, I love to learn about the human experience.
Right.
Right. I find there to be tremendous fulfillment and joy and pleasure in growing and constantly, as you say, being a work in progress. And,
so let me interrupt you.
Yeah.
What's the root of that? If you go back and you go, I love studying the human experience.
Yeah.
And the whys behind it. What's the root of that? Well, where did that start, and why did it start? Tell us that.
Well, it's a good question, because there's part of me just feels like that's how I was brought into this world. That's just me, mm-hmm. right? And debatably, we could argue, and I'm not sure, but I sort of believe that that's all of us, mm-hmm. right? And that we're all here to evolve as human beings, to go on a journey of life, and that how some of us kind of do that in different ways, and some of us maybe, evolve more than others. I mean, and I'm not saying that's me. I'm just saying that I do believe the human experience is about growing, right? That's like your soul's purpose for being here. Right. I think, what you're getting at is like, I had sort of a chaotic childhood, and my father, had all sorts of issues which have been, well documented. I've talked about that, extensively, and I don't really even, kind of go into much detail about that anymore. Not because I'm not willing to share it, but because I've kind of healed that part of me, and it doesn't feel as important or powerful to me anymore. Right. And it's something I'm totally happy to share in support of other people. But I've done a lot of work around that, and it's kind of lost some of its importance to me.
That's great.
But yes, as a kid, I had
so that's one of the roots of endurance.
It is, and I do have these kind of memories, including going to a therapist when my parents were getting divorced. I was probably 8, 9 years old. And coming out of that experience thinking, when can I go back? That was great.
Right.
So, I have kind of gravitated towards therapy, towards coaching, towards self-help. I mean, I was in, probably middle school and listening to Wayne Dyer books on tape, like I just,
that's great.
Sort of have always loved the work. And, there's been all kinds of things as a teenager and, struggles and, into adulthood and, finding my way and professionally.
Right.
And again, I'm happy to share anything if you have, specific.
No, you're doing it.
Questions.
There's not a right answer.
It's I think for me, it starts at a very young age and forget about kind of what sort of, home you are raised in, which I don't think, is unimportant. But, what I think happens is we get conditioned.
Well, let me just steer you.
Okay.
So we got all that. And I get all that. And you don't need to tell that story because you've made your peace with it, which, by the way, one of the roots of endurance, that if you're going to thrive, you do need to look back, but you don't live back. You look back. You learn from whatever, with dad, mom, your own trips, falls, and you make your peace with your past. So if we're going to endure, one of the things we got to do is make peace. We've all got a past. We got to make peace with it. Right? This is what you said. I don't need to talk about it. I've made my peace. Good. That's one of the roots. And so what else? Well, let's talk about how does a guy who's got life by the, short hair. You have to probably edit that. You got life right where you want it when you look at where you are now. But I remember you sitting in the president's role at a family real estate company, like it was yesterday. And one of the roots for endurance are making your peace with your past and not getting comfortable with your present, continuing to take risks, to challenge yourself, to keep growing. Because when we are at a young age, the president of a family business, one of the things that is not a root of endurance, but it is a root of most humanity, is we just settle for our place. We play it safe because we've achieved so much now that we're like, okay, man, I guess the root of endurance would be just, the old saying, don't look a gift horse in the mouth, which you had. And you did. And you said, no thanks, right? And took a jump out a window, which people can say, well, yeah, it's easy to do because of who he is. It's like, no, it isn't. That's really hard to do. So I would like to know, what compelled that? Because that's one of the roots of endurance.
Yeah. So just to kind of circle back on the making peace with things, I want to just kind of make sure people know that, you can't skip over the hard parts and get to peace, right?
That's right.
So I arrived at peace on kind of my childhood and my relationship with my father in particular, after doing a lot of work.
Right.
That wasn't the case for a long period of time. In fact, it's sort of recent that I've actually really landed in that spot because I have sort of, come to a new place in our relationship where I can kind of let it all go.
Right.
And so, I guess the point is that you can make peace, but you have to do the work. And you're probably going to experience all the hard emotional stuff that really needs to be felt and shared and worked on, and then peace comes.
Amen.
Right?
My belief to tie to that is everything's about the core. I have a belief very much exactly tied to that sentiment you're sharing to the listener, which my belief about peace And here I wrote it out. I've memorized it because it's emblazoned on my. Peace is found on the other side of acute pain. There's the recipe.
Yeah. Yes.
And peace is fleeting.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Right.
Yes to all of that.
Yes to all that. So that's what you're telling the listener. So you're not going to arrive at peace by just making yourself relaxed about your past. You're going to go through acute pain, however you go through it, with all of this to find peace in your present and in your future and in your past. The other side of acute pain, not chronic, and going to therapy was acutely painful.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. All of
drinking
it was.
And numbing is chronic.
Sure. And, I, have kind of played with all of it. And, I sort of feel like, I've kind of talked about this. Russell Brand talks about the last time that he went into rehab, and he was like a massive heroin addict. And when he arrived at the rehab, the intake person said, "Oh, look, you were so creative to use heroin to numb your pain. Welcome. We're going to help you do that another way now." And so you kind of have to go through the whole thing to figure it out. I mean, unfortunately, I was never a heroin addict, but you numb in ways, and you do hard work, and it's a journey, right? That's why they call it a journey. But I like the way that you've kind of distilled that belief down in the language, and I agree with all of that. And to your question about jumping, I think that
you're now just answering my question.
I am, yeah. I feel like the answer to your question at the time is different than how I see it in hindsight.
I know.
And so at the time, and I will include you in this because I think this is really important, that it might look like a crazy jump, and it might have been. And you're right. I mean, I had a great situation by all standards. I had a pretty, good gig. And, it had the recipe for lots of, things that you would want in your career. I could have made an entire career there. But I had coaching, right? I was putting myself out there in sort of what you would probably call baby steps, in that I was exploring by hiring a coach, I was exploring by going to Landmark Forum and trying to figure out, well, what was it that I really wanted to create with my life? Exploring by surrounding myself in networks and around other people that were entrepreneurial, and they were doing big, risky things or creative things. And so I was kind of trying to try it on a little bit before I made the jump.
Yeah.
Right. So it wasn't just like, fuck it. It was like, I feel like there's something else out there for me. And there was some part of me that had a deep enough why to do that. And one of the main things that really helped me do that was the work we did, which was figuring out who I was and what my purpose was and what my passion was and what I believed, even if, that was just at that time. And when I got clear on what it was I wanted to go to, I jumped.
Oh, yeah.
Now, in hindsight, this is just, a quick part of the in hindsight, which I've, later learned. And it's because I've had that experience in others that I know this to be true. And so it gets a little bit easier to keep jumping. But I believe that taking risks and taking, jumps out of the comfortable and, that kind of place that you might stay in for the rest of your life is a part of our evolution as human beings. Right. That in order for us to fully realize as a human being in this lifetime, you have got to go run towards that next chapter. Even though it might be scary, and even though you're leaving something pretty cushy, whatever happens on the other side of the next chapter is serving you and your growth and evolution as a human being. And once I've had that experience and realized that, it gives me energy to kind of keep going with that.
That's good. So that's the That's the why you can jump from something really good. Because of your belief system. Because of your faith.
Yes, it is faith too.
It is.
I do have.
Because there was no guarantee.
No.
We didn't even know if we could get a bank to even give you a hand. And you frickin' took the risk and jumped before we even secured lenders, which in your business is like jumping out of an airplane and then checking to see if the chute is there. That's what it was like. And that's how clarifying a big dream is, which is also a key to endurance, is like the only way we endure is if we have a guiding dream, an overarching vision, as we use in Built to Lead language, that you did at ode your opus. And when you got clear on that, you're like, I'm taking the risk. It's not happening here. And I'm clear on that, Chet. I'm like, okay, BK, let's kind of slow down and get it. No, I'm not clear on that, so I'm jumping. You with me? You know what I mean? And I love that. I prefer that over me having to have a client that gets all this clarity, but they're so comfortable where they are that they keep delaying the jump. And I want to tell you, the root of endurance is catch a big dream and take the risk before you're ready. Okay. Most of us keep getting ready. That's the root of staying put.
Yeah, it all seems sort of like counterintuitive.
I know.
Right? I mean, and maybe you can expand on that part a bit, because, it seems like, well, I know that in the not being ready, the amount of opportunity to learn and get what you need because you weren't ready is so much greater than waiting until you're ready. Right? You actually you get it much faster if you go sooner. Right?
There's no substitute. That is the human experience. We learn by, like you said, experimenting and playing, as opposed to thinking and preparing. And I'm not telling people to jump out of airplanes without chutes.
Right.
But I am saying
you were pulling me back.
I was pulling you back.
Yeah.
But you knew you were not going to splatter. You knew you had a parachute. That was in your belief. You had faith in that. That is a great, great thing. And so I wanted the listeners to hear that, because I don't want them to miss that. So we're hearing all this time today, it's really popular to tell people to be present and to kind of get into this Zen-like moment about like being, nothing wrong with that. I'm all about that. And it's be present with an edge, not be present and at peace.
Well, I think, we could maybe
we could spend a whole
tease that out a little bit,
right?
Well, and let's just for a minute, because I'm curious to make sure I'm clear on what you're saying, because doesn't that isn't it kind of sort of dependent on what you're trying to do?
Yes, and I'm assuming anybody listening to this is chasing what?
Big dream.
A big dream. So that's why I'm saying what I'm saying. Chasing excellence. If somebody just wants to lead a normal life, this podcast probably they clicked the wrong dial, or whatever you say in podcast language, because we're talking about the roots of endurance if you're chasing excellence, not the roots of endurance if you want to live forever. I personally don't want to live forever. I think longevity is overrated. I want to live exceptionally for whatever time I have. You know what I mean? And endure whatever because I'm chasing my big dream with my whole heart. And I'm taking plenty of risks, not uncalculated, but plenty of risks, because I believe that's the way we're supposed to go, not slowly fade away. No. So I'm talking about the roots of endurance, not for longevity. When people hear endurance, they think about, how do I keep Kaufman development around after I'm gone? How is it built to lead, endure past the founder? That's a worthy aim as well. My aim is, how do we build it right now while we're here exceptionally? How do we chase excellence? So those few that follow behind will have more than enough to endure without us here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. I kind of think, just like going back to the presence with peace part.
Yeah.
That
I knew that one would get you a little bit.
Yeah, because I think it reminds me of this. One of my favorite books is Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer, and he talks about how he, took a big jump, leaves his career and his academics, and moves out into the woods and starts this meditation center, and gets it all built, and all these people come to support him to help build this thing. He gets it built, and he's finally ready to meditate, and he starts to meditate. And there's a barking dog on the property next to him that won't stop barking, right? And so I think even in like presence and peace,
right,
which I think, like that's just a choice. Like, if that's what you're after, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think that that can't be excellence. The question is, I think the point is you're still going to need root endurance.
That's right.
If that's, no matter what. It takes maybe even more root endurance to just be peace, right? Edge sometimes comes a little bit more naturally to people, maybe not always, but no matter what, if you're gonna get, that's kind of the irony. Like, you're gonna have the barking dogs no matter where you are, and you're gonna have to dig deep to learn how to be with what is.
Yeah. We could just go forever on that. People think that the root of my endurance is my edge. You know what I mean? Like, people feel like that's who I am. Like, Chet's just tough. So of course he's enduring because he's weird. He's just this tough dude, which is hysterical actually to me, because this has been a built skill by me for me, because my natural tendency is just to be comfortable. And just to be cool and laid back. I would never be where I am today if that's part of who I am. And I'm also a guy with an edge.
Yeah, I think it's important for people that don't know you, just because I'm like, well, yeah, Chet is tough and he is got an edge, but that's not really kind of how I think about you.
Right.
And so I think that's sort of the work you've done, right? Is that you're it's tough and tender.
That's right.
Right? Like, you're a big teddy bear.
Totally.
Right? Like, you're a
That's
lover.
the natural state.
That's your natural state.
100%.
You know how to access the edge and the toughness when you need to endure, or when, or even in your kind of internal daily routine. This isn't so much about a external edge. Right? This is about like being strong with yourself, even maybe more than anything, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
100%. And so all virtue, ancient term, we don't use it much today, but all virtue, the ancients would say, built going against one's nature.
Interesting.
What a crazy thing. By the way, we're the only part of the animal kingdom where that's true. Which again, just blows my mind when you think about a great lion becomes a great lion by doing all the things that instinctively that lion knows that's who they are. So they become a great hunter by doing it over and over again and just being who they are instinctively. Whereas we want to be who we are. And the ironical thing about getting there is we're going to have to go against our nature to get to that.
Okay, let me get curious with you about that.
Yeah.
Second nature. Because don't you think the nature that we're going against is really the nature we've developed based on our experience in life, society, whatever, not the nature that we were born into and from?
But that's exactly right.
Right? So
100%.
It's sort of kind of going back to our natural state, right, is what we're actually, because I think that, we are also instinctual human beings.
We are.
We've just kind of lost our way.
One could say we've lost our way, and one could also say that we in our evolutionary process, this is what I believe.
Yeah.
That we're much more complex beings today than we've ever been. And that'll be true going forward. Mm-hmm. And one of the problems with increasing complexity in any system is that complication kind of seeps in through the back door. Mm-hmm. And so because of modern life and the growth of our look at it and our experience in families and whatever else, right? We have, you could say we have lost, we've forgotten who we are. You know what I mean? And so we're going to go back to just simply be who we are. But what I'd like to think about, it's just more complex to be who we are today.
Okay, let me kind of challenge that a little bit, or maybe because you might actually just agree with this. I agree. Actually, I don't think "lost our way" is really kind of accurate in what I believe.
Right.
It sort of is, but I think what it misses is the sort of divine architecture that has, in my worldview, everything being perfect for what it is and what it's not. Yep. And so there is really no ever being lost. It's sort of your path towards coming home.
Right.
Right. And that, you kind of have to be lost. It's part of the architecture of it all. It's part of the design of it all that you kind of get pushed this way so you know how to come back that way. Because if you don't actually go over and feel that, touch that stove, you can't really embody what it's like to get, aligned and home, right?
Yeah.
So maybe, from that worldview, there really is no lost. And it's all kind of happening perfectly. Mm-hmm. I struggle a little with that, because I think there's action that's necessary too. Like you kind of have to, you could just keep touching the stove over and over
That's
again.
That's right.
And some people do.
That's exactly right. And so that's another root of endurance is, we make our peace with our past. We live in this moment with an edge and with a calm together, right? We dream big about the future. We get a big dream like you did for what KDEV could be. You didn't even know the name of it. And then we marry productive action. Like there's way too many people today, again, who I run into who tell me about their big dream. And I'm like, okay, good. I get it. That's a good one. What are we doing? Mm-hmm. Well, I'm preparing. Well, I'm still thinking about it. Well, I need more of this or I need less of that. I got to wait till the kids get it going. You know what I mean? The root of endurance. Pressfield's my favorite author who's alive. He said this recently on a podcast. I'd never heard him say it before. I think it's now I see him saying it all the time. So I follow him. And his sentiment to this, to what we're talking about just do it, or done so from Kit Carson, or Imbrera from your Hebrew roots. Do you remember what that means? No alternative.
I'm a bad Jew.
I know you're a bad Jew, but that's how they won the 6-day war, 7-day war, which really was 6 days. Mm-hmm. His phrase, he's Jewish too, so you should listen to this guy. He's one of yours. Mm-hmm. Did you know that?
Who? Pressfield?
Pressfield.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So you're not that bad a Jew. You knew.
Well, I mean,
Let's give you a little credit.
I was a horrible Hebrew school student, but I know a little bit here and there.
A little bit here and there. Yeah. So he says this, love it. Put your ass where your heart wants to be. There you go.
Yeah,
That's,
this was actually
I
one of
love
the
that.
blogs that I wanted to talk to you about. You wrote about that recently.
Yeah.
And yeah, let's talk about that. Put your ass where your heart wants to be. When I hear that, I hear like, just go do the work. The blog post in particular was talking about how he wrote his first draft to his book, and it was way too big,
Right.
way too long.
Right.
The publisher or
800 and
editor
some
came
pages.
back and said, no, this needs to be whatever, 200-300 pages.
Right.
And rather than kind of getting all sideways, hung up in his heart, he went to work.
Right.
Right. He put his ass into the work, sat
That's
down
right.
and started to figure out how to make that happen. That's what
Right.
you're talking about, right?
100%.
Mhm.
And it's so simple. So simple. And yet so misunderstood. We make it complicated. It's actually a pretty complex phenomenon to live out putting your ass where your heart wants to be. And so those are the roots of endurance. Make your peace, live in the moment, but with an edge while content, dream big, and then do the work. Do the work and do it over and do it again and do it again and do it again. And without the big dream, without all the rest of that recipe, you just fall off. People quit. I see it all the time. They get distracted. Today, more than ever, we make excuses. And I hear them all the time. So that's why I wanted to talk about the roots. It's like I had a client the other day tell me this with regard to their lack of discipline on a productive action that they wrote about, that they understood, that they knew was required for them to get to where they want to get. And he explained to me, because he's going through a couple of transitions right now in his life. He explained to me, and my job is just to inspect what you tell me you want me to inspect. So I'm here to help coach you to be who you want to be. So I do that every time we practice. I say, hey, how are you doing with this? And he's like, I've epically failed. I'm like, okay, what are we going to do about it? And he goes, well, I'm going to wait until I get to my new city and we get settled. And then I'm going to start it up again. That is not how we endure. That is not the root. And I've talked to many other builders about this topic, and my bride and others who have said to me, like, well, there are time and place for everything. I'm like, yeah, we can change the duration of whatever it is that we're working on due to circumstance. But if you really want to be exceptional, if you really want to be excellent and chase your best, you are not going to make excuses for when you decide to stick to disciplines. They're not disciplines. And as I talked him through that, and I actually involved one of his truth tellers, his bride, we kind of ganged up on him in a good way because we love the dude. And he realized he was simply doing what so many people do that is not an endurance trait. They make excuses. And we are now to the point where we give excuses. I'm being given excuses all the time by my peer group for why, based on my place in life, based on my heart's condition, what they think it is, that I should sit on the sidelines more, like they act my age. And that, Chet, you have an excuse. And I'm like, no, that's not the point of life. I don't want an excuse. I want to chase excellence, which means I've got to build endurance. And the world today is giving everybody more and more reasons not to. And you have every reason to where you could take it easy, mail it in. And when you and I practice, you're chewing on what's next because you want to endure. And you're not just settling for doing what you've always done. And you ask me questions all the time. Is that okay? I don't know what to do next. I'm not sure how to be. I'm so used to being busy that it's felt really uncomfortable. It's been acutely painful for you to be in this state where you feel like you're in between. I hear that all the time.
Well, let me ask you about that because
Does that make sense?
it does. And you wrote blog post this morning about that a bit, right? That you about discipline, and that you went to your doctor, and your doctor told you, you need to, watch the sugar a little bit. That you had kind of slipped back into not bad, but just a little more than maybe you were right after your heart attack.
Right.
And I guess what I'm kind of curious about, a number of things, the idea of endurance and enduring, and doing the work,
right?
I think can sort of feel overwhelming for people,
right?
Right, and everybody knows it's hard, and everybody knows that it's not quick, and some people just don't want to do it, and they'll come up with stories, right? Well, I'm gonna wait till I move, and right, it's very easy. We do that, very easily. So I'm kind of curious, like even for somebody like you, who is so disciplined, who's done so much work, who had
in certain areas.
Well, okay. I mean, in a lot of areas, but let's just kind of talk about the health piece. Like even then, we sort of can slip a little bit, right? And so, is it having truth tellers? Like in your client's case, you and his bride, or in your case, a doctor, and so one, like how, I guess there's a few things. One, how important is it to surround yourself with truth tellers? Two, baby steps. We talk a lot about baby steps, and I think this is key. Like it's not as big and hard as we make it if we make it small, a little bit at a time.
Yeah.
And so I'll pause there. Maybe you could just, speak to those two things.
Yeah. So how important, if we're going to endure, are truth tellers? I would say imperative, non-negotiable, impossible to endure alone. Fact. I mean, if we study the people, okay, give you a great example. To endure in isolation in a prison camp is probably one of the hardest things for a human to do. Number one, you're confined against your will. You've been in some kind of a battle. The enemy has you, and they isolate you. The reason they do that is because it's the easiest way to break you. And so if you study people that have survived long-term isolation in an enemy prison camp, you will hear this story. I found ways to connect to my few. I mean, sometimes they did it with Morse code on the walls. Sometimes they did it with a broomstick. If you study Stockdale, who lived in the Hanoi Hilton for 7 years, he got really creative. But he had to, because if he stays alone, he knows he's going to go nuts. And when you go nuts, you quit. You give up. And if you study Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl, he would say that most of the men that he was with in Auschwitz did not die at the hand of anyone but themselves. They just laid in their bed and gave up because they lost the connection to other people. They just isolated themselves and they just said, there's no point. I give up. So how important is a truth teller? How important is truth teller? Imperative. How important it is to enjoy the camaraderie of suffering? Imperative. So you need a truth teller and you need somebody to go through all of the struggle with you. You will not do well without a truth teller, and you will not do well if you have a truth teller, but everything they tell you, you have to go do on your own, you will not endure. You need to surround yourself with other people. That's why you go to these conferences. That's why you go seek out different groups and teams, because you know there's power in that kind of community. So we need truth tellers. We need real community. And more today, we don't have the first, and we tell ourselves we don't have time for the second. And so we have a lot of elite people trying to just gut it out alone. They think that, well, I've got friends on Facebook or Instagram or other place, but when I ask, write down your few that you would weep the most for if they passed while you were here. Most of my clients even have a very hard time struggling with finding a few that they feel that connected with. Now you realize that's counter-evolutionary.
Mm-hmm.
We're meant to have a tribe, a clan, club. That's been in our roots forever. That's the root of endurance, is not going it alone. And yet today in our society, we have more loneliness than ever before in the history of humanity, with really successful people. And we see it all the time. And so I'm like, you need a truth teller, and you need to have some comrades that you share your struggle with.
Okay, so just give me a minute on the importance of baby steps, chunking this out a little bit at a time. Talk about, and I know there's been like a lot, talked about tiny habits and whatever, but speak to really just how important that step is, the baby step.
Where does that thought come from? The baby step. Well, it comes from, again, just looking at how we end up where you and I are. Like, I have a grandbaby now, Aiden James. He's not baby stepping in a literal sense yet. He just celebrated his 2 months. Okay. He's moving his head. He's lifting his head up. And we're all like, wow, that's pretty good for 2 months. He's already trying to roll over. He's like moving the shoulders to try to roll, right? As opposed to just being in a stagnant position. So as we study this idea about baby stepping, why is that a big deal? Well, it's because that's how we've evolved. We start off 100% dependent on others to care for us. And instinctively, we know that we need to pull ourselves up and walk. Like we're meant for that. And before that, we've got to figure out how to get our head up, roll over so we can crawl, right? Mm-hmm. To move. And then someday we can be like you, an athlete running around a tennis court, chasing down, balls, you know what I mean? And running around them so we can hit that power forehand instead of just lob the backhand back to baby Cass. That was for you.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. And so the idea of baby step comes from, that's just our evolutionary truth. And that it's as simple as that. And so it's crawl, walk, run. Yeah. And so baby step is just that perfect illustration of, hey, I want my clients to take giant leaps someday. Yeah. But the way we get those is we've just done a lot of baby stepping. And it appears to the world like we did a giant leap from Schottenstein to KDAV. Yeah. The reality is that jump, that giant leap where you evolved, it feels like in an instant, like you were transformed from a part of a business to my own to where we are today. That was a bunch of aggregation of baby steps that led you to that clarity where you made the leap. Yeah. And we tend to just recognize people that make the leap. Yeah. And so the baby step is like the way you make the leap, baby step right now. Yeah. You hired me and the other 9 dudes said, that's craziness. Mm-hmm. You took the baby step. Yeah. Right there. And boom, 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 boom. So we tell clients, don't be overwhelmed. Don't think too far into the future. For now, let's baby step. Yeah. The gig is we got to start moving.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually just recently was asked about my success from a young person who was kind of just getting curious with me about, and it was sort of kind of brought to my attention, like in this, sort of way you were kind of saying people will, talk about me or other successful people, like all the reasons why, we've got it good or something. Right.
Right.
And I said, it kind of occurred to me that the thing is that it's not that like I'm so smart or that I've kind of like, done something so great. It's just that people make it a lot harder than it actually is.
Right.
It's not actually that hard. If you string together a lot of baby steps and a lot of action and you're willing to get uncomfortable and you're willing to take risk, it's actually just not that hard.
Right.
We make it huge because we make it a huge step.
Right.
We think about from I'm here and I want to get there and that's a mile away. Mm-hmm. And the truth of the matter is it might be, but if you just take one step at a time, that one step that's not hard for you, right, or a little bit hard for you, and you string enough of those together, like you can do it too. It's just not that hard.
Right.
I have one last question for you. Because you said something earlier about wanting to live, and I forget the exact words you used, but that you're not interested in longevity, is what you said,
Burn
right?
out bright.
You want to burn out bright.
Mm-hmm.
So I struggle a little bit with that because when I hear that, I'm like, well, I don't want you to burn out bright. I mean, sure, I want you to be bright, but I don't want to see you burn out at all, period. Right? Like I want you, Chet, to be here for a very, very long time. And I want you to live fully that whole time.
I agree.
So
I'm with
can
you.
it not be both? I mean, can you just kind of like make sure people hear exactly what you're saying there so they don't just like start like doing crazy shit and dying too soon?
Yeah. So so I want to live a long life. I do want that, but I want to be fully alive living it. And again, I can't control like disease, genetics, chance. There's all these elements that I could get hit by a bus, walking out of here today, rushing to my next client. So I'm not on a death wish by any stretch. But here's a fact. As much as we've evolved and gotten more complex, if we study just American males, which I've studied a bit, our healthy physical life has not moved in 50 years. Now we're living longer. Our lifespan has increased, but our healthy physical life, mobility-wise, is still limited to roughly the American male moves until 69. We endure until like 78 now. We've moved that number on average. I mean, I'm giving you all the averages, but that's moved up a few years. So we're living a bit longer today due to all kinds of things. But our mobility, our ability to be on our own and moving has not moved a bit. And when I say I want to burn out bright, that's why I wrote today's post about harder. That the gig is that we've become too comfortable. And so we have a lot of people that have just stopped moving, and not that much older than me. And that might lead you to some longevity gains, with just modern medicine. That's not going to have you living fully, So I do want to be here a while, but I'm going to keep moving it. And that's risky. The older you get, the more that is risky, right? But it's worth it. I'm not taking crazy risks. I'm not asking the listener to go out there and jump out of airplanes and do crazy stuff. But I am saying that longevity is overrated. Living fully is the gig. And I hope to do both. So I don't mean to put a scary sentiment out there. That's not what I'm saying. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I just wanted to kind of make sure I heard that everybody else, did too, that it's sort of an and.
It is.
Right. That because I know part of you living fully is doing a whole bunch of things that make you healthier and hopefully living longer too. So
I'll give you a quick story and then we'll end it. I had a client the other day who's younger than you. He's 18 years younger than me. And he's not on the trail to enduring. He's enjoying too much success. And I told him the truth. That's, he has all these big hopes and dreams for when he's my age, which is 18 years away. And I called him a few names to get his attention. And then I told him that there's no way on his trajectory he'll be able to do what he's dreaming of doing when he's my age. He's going to be sitting around watching. He's just not healthy and physical now. He's enjoying the fruits of a really great 45 years. He's enjoying it too much. He's not enduring well. He's changing, I believe, but I had to wake him up. And so I made him write a dream out for when he's my age, 18 years. I said, give me the healthy dream. And now what are we going to put our ass where our heart wants to be right now? Because he had none of the disciplines to allow that dream to be real in 18 years. And I got him to see that. He saw it. So now we're we're enduring by doing the little things, baby stepping. We're not jumping. We're just baby stepping. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
But he's on the right trajectory now. And it's just a matter of months. And I'm going to help him stick to it. But it got me thinking about myself. And so I'm like, well, 18 years, Chet, let's do the same drill. So I did. I'll be 81. That was sobering. If I'm here, I'll be 81. I'm like, I just started writing down, what do I want to do? And the first thing that came to mind, I'm going to just share this. I won't share the whole, but the first thing you will appreciate it because you know me and you know some of my passions. And this is how simple it is. One of my big dreams in 18 years will be getting on the Autobahn. I'm not sure where, but we'll probably start somewhere around Stuttgart. And I'll be in my son's GT3. And my grandson will be switching off roles, driving and passenger. He'll be 18. And it'll be a manual. And I'll be comfortable shifting, downshifting, flying through corners. And I wrote it out and I visualized with my little baby Aiden at 18 sitting beside me and just laughing as we go to the Black Forest. And it's like, that's not any big physical, like I'm not climbing some big mountain range in my mind. It was as simple as just riding in a car with my grandson. But
it's awesome.
Isn't that?
I love it. Yeah.
It's simple.
It kind of reminds me of like the Son of a Woman scene, where Al Pacino is driving the Ferrari, It's just,
I don't know that one, but I like it.
Oh, so good. He's blind and he, is planning on taking his life and he wants to go do some things before he does. And he gets in this Ferrari and he's grinding gears and, he's just having the time of his life. So I'll be 65 and I plan to take what I hope to have by then. It might take 18 years to get a GT3, but I'll hopefully be along for that ride with you. And it's
side by side,
as we have been now for not quite 18 years, but we're logging.
We're
some
in the teens
hours and years, and it's always fun to do this with you. I know you've got to go get to a fancy client, but we could do this for days, and we will continue to do this as well as many other things together.
Amen.
So for the audience, whether you like it or not, we're having fun, and we're going to keep doing.
I'm sure the ending to this is we may have to edit.
Well, I think hopefully the audience doesn't have to work too hard to endure us. Yeah. But
thank you.
Root endurance. Good stuff. Thanks, Chet.
It was fun. Thank you.